become the smartest man in the world by utilization of ask you a bunch of random things and see what you come up with.
I know it. Well, I've learned the trick of ChatGPT is being able to clearly articulate the question that you want to get a reply to.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll give about 30 seconds or so more as people are filtering in here. So we have this great session that's being done by one of the marketing folks from one of our lender members. A shout out to First Option Mortgage. That it's and it's interactive at our conference in Denver. And it is all about how to customize ChatGPT to make it in your language.
Really?
Yeah, it
Really
should
pretty
be a
cool.
lot of fun, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I've gone to I'm okay paying the $20 for the subscription because I can kind of put my profile in, so I don't have to say I'm a mortgage, leader at a bank owned mortgage. It knows all that on the front side, so it puts a level of context or relevance to the questions that I ask. So
yeah,
it's great.
yeah. You will learn more in Denver, I guarantee you. It was eye-opening for me. So, and it's in one of our keynote spots. It should be a fun session where you can get on and do it while you're there. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the last week in mortgage today. With me is Rob Henger. Many of you know him, who is the president of mortgage lending at Local Bank. He was just showing me how he's just become like the smartest man in the world
I can
using
I
chat.
can fake it that I'm the smartest man in the world, right?
And he has answers to any question. So I think at some point in time I should test him on that. But we will get started here. Pop into the chat. I would love to hear from the rest of you. Are you using ChatGPT? Are you using it a lot? How are you using it? Share with me what your experiences are. I'm kind of curious now after he's done something with my meeting notes for today that is intriguing to me. So,
Y'all,
um,
faith is such a well prepared, study of the industry that she sent me meeting notes that were like 7 pages
5 pages long.
long. Yeah, they're like 7 pages long and like eight size font. And I looked at that and I'm like, there's no way I can read that in the 5 minutes that I prepared for this. So I just uploaded them into ChatGPT and said, give me the summary so that when I talk with Faith, I don't look like an idiot. And literally, I typed in, no, I don't look like an idiot, and it did exactly that. It's great.
You have a fan on with us today. Angel Duke says, find the fun. And Kelly Haney, I can't even imagine you being a mean person that you use ChatGPT to make yourself sound nicer, but maybe that's why I always thought you were a really nice person.
That's funny. Well, y'all, hey, Angel, good to see you. Angel and I have worked together for many years, so it's nice. It's a blessing to be able to work with people at some companies, and then you go away and you still become friends and still work together.
Absolutely. We love that here. So let's get started by talking a little bit about some of the things that have been out in the industry this week that I kind of saw. And one of them, it always catches my attention. I was having this conversation with actually a friend just last week about the cost of housing, how expensive houses are, what we purchased our first home for, which granted it was a number of years ago now.
Well, let's go
Um,
there. While we're here, let's go there. So what? So do you remember how much you paid and how long ago it was?
I do because it was a very long, complicated story. We were 20, almost, well, close to 30 years old when we purchased our first house here in the Twin Cities. We decided to be very adventurous because we like new things to build our very first home that we ever
Oh,
had.
oh,
We
yeah.
had a
You're
great,
not still married to that person anymore, are you?
I am not. Well, I'm not, but
You
he
really
was in
tested.
the
You really
house.
tested the bounds of marriage early, didn't you?
I was married to him for over 30 years. And he is still in the house that we built
Well, that's funny.
back then, it was a very, very nice house, but it actually, became a workout home because our builder bit off a little bit more than they could chew and ended up selling the houses that were being built to somebody to finish 2 weeks before our closing. So
Cool.
it was quite an experience for buying your first home, but we built it for $99,900. It is on a 385-foot deep lot, almost an acre in town, in a really, really nice home, but that is now valued at well over $400,000 probably. Um, and well, kudos to him for ending up with it and having all of that equity. Um,
Well, but I think it's kind of fun to go through those stories, and we do think about the fact that we're in the 30-year amortization business, which is the opposite of compound interest, right? And I know for me, the first house I bought was probably in the early 90s, so it was 30 years ago, and paid 60 grand. And the poor lady that owned it before me had emphysema, and she smoked her whole life. So like literally you could see the nicotine coming down the walls.
oh,
So it was kind of to say it was a fixer upper was an understatement. And I started painting and fixing and things like that. And 6 months later, one of our neighbors went through unfortunately divorce and then came in and wanted to buy the house before it was done. So it worked out pretty good. But I think my daughter's 24 years old, and I won't tell you how much she just paid for her house recently. That's another story. But it's amazing. That neighborhood is probably 300 to 400, and
yeah.
it's I mean, I don't know what the average age of the people watching this are right now, but it's kind of scary to think about being in their 20s right now and facing buying a $300,000-400,000 house. Maybe my daughter thinks that's normal. To me, it seems overwhelming, but you know.
I know. 1990, September of 1990, is when we purchased. Yeah, so I mean, significant difference. The why we were talking about it was I was sharing with them that I wouldn't buy that house for what it costs now. And I love that house, and it's a very nice, very well kept up house. And Todd ended up with it because he mowed that yard for all of these years, which is like an acre in town. And so he's deserving of the what the house is now worth. But yeah, and that's exactly why we were having this conversation. So one of the things I landed on, in 237 cities in the United States, starter homes are worth $1 million right now.
That's amazing. And I think if
Yeah.
memory serves me correct, when I did read a little bit into the details, four of the top 5 cities, 4 of them were in California, one was in Massachusetts, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep, that is correct. And so concentrated in areas where, we notoriously have thought that housing is, maybe more expensive than in some other places. But 5 years ago, there were only 84 of those cities instead of 237. So between 2019 and 2024, starter home values increased 54.1%. And we've got, Tony, thanks for popping that in. It's always a good reminder. It's like, those 20 something people, if they've went to college, they have also probably some of them, if they're very fortunate, they don't, but have that student loan debt. And then she said, what's another $300,000 for a home? Already got $100,000, sunk into your education. But it's like, yeah, you have, a daughter in that age range who just bought
Well,
a house, apparently.
so speaking of Chat GPT and the average first-time home buyer, so I just asked it in the United States today, what is the average first-time home buyer price point? And you want to guess?
I mean, in the 250,
Keep going, sister.
275.
Keep going.
Oh, 345 is a guess that's in the chat.
Keep
360,
keep keep
385.
going. Keep going. Higher. It's like
Oh,
this is
keep
like
going up. rest
It's like
385.
Wheel of Fortune or whatever, some other game show. Yeah, wait, Tim's real close, but he's still higher.
Or
So,
27. I think I read
400,
it.
as of today, 431,000 per Consumer Affairs and Redfin, courtesy of ChatGPT.
You truly have become the smartest man. Um, yeah, I mean, so think about that, and then like what kind of income that you have to be able to support that. And then we all know that houses don't typically not cost something after you move into them as well. So that you kind of need to plan for that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so it is overwhelming. I remember my daughter, like 5 or 6 years ago, bought her first home. That one wasn't as stressful, but then they sold it and then they bought a second home. And I remember, and they're in an ideal neighborhood that they could probably sell their house in a day, even when the market isn't good. So, but they paid almost $500,000 for their home then, 4 years ago. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Which is probably the exact same thing my parents thought when we were building a house, way back when at 99.9, probably the same thought process because we are parents, but best investment they ever could have made. They've set themselves up for, they're already doing good, but they set themselves up very nicely when they purchased that house, which I think is probably sells closer to the $1 million range right now.
The,
And it's
I
1,200 square feet of home.
really,
Yeah.
there was a
Great.
statistic. I got involved in a nonprofit couple, about a year or two ago, and I remember this statistic that sits with me, and that is the average American that owns a home. So from a 24-year-old to a 75-year-old, right? Just, and it doesn't matter whether it's California or Alabama, the average net worth of a homeowner was a little over $250,000, $250,000. That's their net worth. The average net worth of an adult renting a home in the United States
Oh,
is $6,000.
I
So
was
if
going to
you,
say, I
if
knew
you
it was
think
somewhere
about,
around 10. Yeah,
yeah,
between 5 and 10. I read that just a couple of weeks ago.
yeah,
That was out there. And so, it's like home ownership still is the way.
yeah.
It seems like it still is the easiest way to build generational wealth for sure.
Well, and as you also think about it, unfortunately, as we get older every day, at some point in time, you don't want to work, right? At some point in time, we're going to be, not on these calls. And,
Yes,
uh, and if you own a home and it's paid for, then, you're covering your taxes and insurance. And I feel for you poor people in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, that's still a pretty expensive, ownership, cost, but, in Alabama, it's relatively affordable. But if you rent, you don't, you just keep going up. So, you don't, do you ever get to retire?
definitely something that I've thought about recently because I'm way closer to that age than you are and have a new mortgage that technically would pay off when I'm 85 years old or something like that. But
I
I
feel you.
love where I live, so we all do that. Sometimes that business is still out there for people. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, we're touching on costs of everything.
Yeah,
Climate disasters. Climate disasters in certain areas, and I'm always amazed that certain areas always rebuild. They may rebuild differently, but always rebuild. The fires have become a huge thing in certain parts of the country that you don't really think about them being. We've got, the Florida, California, Texas, New Orleans, some of those places have flooding as well. It doesn't appear that those types of things have impacted borrowers from building or buying in those areas, even with those things. That was the headline of the
yeah,
article.
yeah,
I don't know if I believe that as much because of the impact. It may not be deterring people if they have accessibility and they're able to afford those places, but it's got to be deterring people because of the cost associated with
yeah.
homeowners insurance and all of those things, don't you think?
I can, I don't know if I can speak intelligently to wildfires, on the western coast of our country. But I can definitely speak firsthand to the increase in homeowners insurance costs in the coastal markets. I have I'm very blessed to have a little place down on the panhandle of Florida, and in 3 years, the cost of insurance is up 70 some percent. I mean ridiculous. And one of my carriers, one of our carriers just said, "Hey, we're out," and I'll leave nameless. We're out. And then got some quotes on a new policy. They bound the coverage, and then they later came back and said, "Hey, you have some trees that are overhanging your house, and we need to cut those up, cut those down." Normally I'd be like, "It's my house, my trees, whatever." No, I'm happy to do it. I just need insurance. If you want me to cut down the trees, I'll cut down the trees. I think no doubt that climate's impacting us.
Yep.
And I'll tell you another, you know, industry relevant topic on that. Faith, I don't know if you know this, but some of our investors, as we're selling loans, best effort, best exit in the secondary market, have implemented, and PennyMac, and it's okay to say this, I think, PennyMac recently implemented something where if your borrower, I can't remember the guidelines, let's just say if the loan to value is above 80% and you own rental property,
Okay.
normally you run the REO section, right? You pull that off your tax returns, you run it, and you have your DTI based upon your 2-year history of rental income. If your loan to value is a higher risk on this, or your DTI, maybe it's a DTI at a certain level, you have to now go get the current homeowners insurance and the current taxes. And even if, a year ago, you said you on your schedule E on your tax returns, let's say your homeowners insurance was $4,000 and you ran your income analysis, they want you to now come in and use your current homeowners insurance. And if that's
Oh,
$6,000, you need to factor in the current. And that's not an agency guideline, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because if you're renting
this
out
is a big
property,
shift. Yeah.
yeah, and you're probably not able to increase the rents commensurate with the increase in cost. So you got to account for that. So we learned the hard way. We went to sell a loan to PennyMac, and
Ah,
they wouldn't buy it because we didn't have the half a dozen current insurance policies, and we went and got them. But got to remember that.
yeah, that's
Thank you,
interesting.
climate change, right?
I hadn't heard that one yet. The homeowners insurance, Tony, thanks for popping in there. 23% in increase on average in Texas, but 40% on a lake.
Mm.
Um, it's like a lake kind of, I mean, we have a lot of lakes here, but that kind of surprises me because it's not like lake levels are gonna, in most places, rise enough ever. I guess in some places, if you have flooding and you have a lot of rain all at one time, you could have an impact there. So I guess that's what they're trying to compensate for. And then for those of you who are interested in net worth facts and figures, Russ, thanks for popping in. He popped in a great chart on net worth into the chat as well. But yeah, kind of interesting when I was reading this. Speaking of Texas, Texas had the second highest number of wildfires in the United
Really?
States in
Huh.
a year. Yeah, and we always talk about California, and the impact on the hillside in California and all of the very expensive housing in California being impacted. But Texas kind of gets overlooked for that a little bit. So yeah, thought that was kind of interesting that people are still interested in moving into those areas and still doing it. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about rental demand in the United States. It was for a long time that millennials were driving kind of what was happening with rents and everything.
Uh-huh.
Not the case anymore. Apparently, it is now the Gen Zers
Our
that are,
kids.
yeah.
Our kids. I'm looking over your right shoulder, and I'm pretty sure that picture's got a couple years on it.
Oh yeah, it's
Now,
shoot.
again,
20
Again,
plus?
I'm chucking a rock in my own glass house, those pictures up
Mine
there.
are older than yours,
Yeah,
but
they're at least 10 years old, but I know, my daughter is 24. So if I think about it in her journey, she just bought a house a couple months ago. And so she's Gen Z. So
yep. I have a Gen Z and I have a 32-year-old and a 27-year-old.
think about us mortgage because you're on both sides, millennial and Gen Z, but for years, I mean, for the last 10, 15 years of our life, we've been talking about, the millennial segment of coming into their prime home buying years, and they're there. I remember, Barry Habib was always so good about kind of inspiring, in the last couple of years when rates went down, like, well, it's going to get better. We have this housing bubble coming in, or this segment of cohort of generations coming into the home buying age. And it's kind of it's fun to see the generation behind them now coming into that rental market and soon to be following. So for those of you young mortgage bankers out there, and if you're wondering, when is the world going to stop, or is the music going to stop and we're going to take away the chairs, each generation is going to come through and everybody's going to need a house and it's going to be okay. So just hang in there and make as many loans as you can.
I still personally think that, coming into the housing market, I think that like I know that my kiddos were ahead of their friends, some of their friends. I still think there's a lot of untapped opportunity with the millennials, because so many of them have shied away either based on they've looked and they've made offers and they just have gotten so depressed with trying to buy a home in some places and just kind of given up for a while and put it on the back burner. It makes me wonder whether they're all going to try to enter the housing, the purchase market all at the same time.
You know, on a related subject, I'm not sure. I just kind of impromptu. I'm gonna share a friend of mine's realtor. He's a buddy that, I mean, 20, 30 years ago when he was getting started in real estate business and I was making loans, we did business together. And I had lunch with him a couple days ago, and he said one of the things that he's done, he's got 4 kids, and he said the deal he has with each one of his kids is he comes in as dad and helps them buy their first house somewhere whenever they're ready, and he puts down 20%, and he asks them to buy a house that they plan on selling within 24 months and that is a fixer upper or something that they can
Oh,
they
wow.
can get a start on. So he gives them he gives them a 20% down payment, gets them into the house, will help them with renovations, help them understand the value, value money, cost of things. And then within 2 years sells the house. They give him back his gift, right? So I think
Portion.
if the
Yeah.
years go by, we still call that a gift. And then they subsequently, when they sell the house, hopefully they have an appreciation of 10, 20, 30%. And now as they go to their longer term home, their permanent home, their married home, they carry with them a large down payment and more stability. And I just thought that was a pretty unique way to parent, and empower your kids to understand home ownership, and make it work for them. So that was a pretty cool story.
Yeah, I mean, if you can support that, that's very gracious of your friend,
Yeah.
um, to be able to do that. I kind of feel like, in some instances, I know that my friend base and everything kind of did a very similar thing, but tackled it differently in that we paid for kids' college educations.
Yeah.
And so they came out of school, which definitely, if so many people just don't have those resources though, to be able to do those kinds of things. But yeah, that's very generous, of your friend, and I think that we all try to do those things. I just wish that there were more people helping, but that kind of leads us into our next topic of conversation, which is down payment assistance programs and the prevalence of those, like in the marketplace and what's available out there for people. Um, people to kind of like tap into. Down Payment Resources is a company that is in our network. This is information that came directly from them. So I feel like I owe them a shout out, because they have such good information out there. But DPAs are, of course, up. They are tracking over 2,400 DPAs across the United States currently, 213 more programs than a year ago. Now you're hands-on. You've got your hands in loans and stuff, every day now. And are you seeing, like, what are you seeing from a percentage of houses that people are buying that are utilizing down payment assistance at this point?
You know, I think in my world today, it's changed a little bit. So let me kind of speak to a little bit broader context. At a previous employer, a larger institution, you had fair lending and CRA pressures that I don't quite have today at my tiny little bank, right? And we just don't have those pressures. We want to help all people, but in my previous role, we had to develop self-funded DPAs and self-funded portfolio loans to help. So it was not uncommon to have 30 to 40% of our loans were high loan to value, maybe not full all DPAs, but let's call it 15 to 20% were DPAs or SPCP loans, right? Where you're doing 100% loans. Um, I don't know the number today, and maybe that's not a bad question to ask GPT here, but I don't know if I can formulate it and ask you in the time we have left. But I think here's my only commentary I'll say for this. I love the fact that our industry, particularly in the servicing side of things, we believe in skin in the game, and we believe in having the homeowner save up some money, whether it's $500 or whether it's 3% or whether it's 5%. There is a consistent belief that skin in the game will keep the performance of the loans better. And I can tell you from my life experiences, the few times I have had to go take a home away from someone,
Mm.
the two times that come to my brain right now, one was a bond loan, had no down payment, and one was a USDA loan that had no down payment. And in both cases, those were EPDs. So they were defaulted in the first 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And in both cases, I remember I personally had conversations with these folks, and I could feel the fact that they're like, I was thinking about buying a house one day. My now ex-wife wanted to do it. We bought it. I don't care anymore. I'm out. So there was kind of this ambivalence, right? So I do believe that having some skin in the game is important. The downside is when and I'm just not criticism Fannie at all, but Fannie and Freddie are kind of holding on that 3%. I think that's fine. The challenge is guess what we're doing? We're turning around and giving them that 3%.
Yeah.
And is this, are we potentially creating a world where we are creating instead of a hand up, it's a handout? And does that undermine that skin in the game? And I think time will tell. But I do worry a little bit that we're seeing such an increase of DPAs that will create an environment where we may have more defaults someday because folks don't have skin in the game. But I don't have a good solution or alternative.
Well, and it's
Um,
probably too early to see any trending like that too, don't you think? That it's
it's
maybe, I mean, a lot of this has come into the marketplace, in the last year or so. It may just be, um, too early to see some of those trends that may eventually, down the road come through. There's definitely a lot out there. I know that a lot of people in the network have talked about even stacking them so they're not getting, one program, but many of them are stackable that you can put more together and get somebody into a house. And I think, for the right person, with the right
bingo.
intentions, that's
Yep,
always a fabulous thing
you got it.
to be able to do. I do think though that programs that maybe even have um, sweat equity involved in them where
Yep,
you learn how to take care of the house,
yep.
and you have to have some at least time invested in it. Those people, without a doubt, are usually pretty committed people, if they're going to go through all of those steps to do some of those things as well. But I don't think we should ever lose our spirit of not trying to help people, but it will be interesting to see, how that equation plays out and what risks are determined from having done this
Yeah.
down the road. There's further regulation that you and I both know after having been here for a while that could potentially crop up a year or two down the road from, having gone down this path to try to get more people into housing for sure. So
Well, I
yeah.
think it's the right thing to do because people's earnings and savings are not keeping pace with the, call it affordability, the price of homes and the price, and mortgage rates can always change. But so if you are if you are an elected official and you're trying to figure out how to help your constituents, I think SPCP loans and down payment assistance and any type of affordable housing is important. And and let's face it, the black white housing gap, the Hispanic white housing gap is for real. I mean, you can't put your head in the sand and ignore it. So there's a group of there's a many segments of our population that we need to help. And how do we do it with proper risk mitigation, and how do we do it fairly? And for somebody that's in the industry, I couldn't cast a stone right now. I would say I think our politicians and Fannie and Freddie are doing it right and doing it well. I wish there was a magic bullet, but I think they're doing it right and doing it well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. The thing that makes me, that gap that you just talked about between, black and white home ownership is the thing that, as we talked about earlier today, is also, either setting people up for success or not down the
Mhm.
road. And I think that's something that we always need to be very cognizant of in our world that we reside in. So, love the focus on helping change some of that. I think that's one of the best things that we could do for our cities, our communities, our country as an overall. So it'll be interesting to see. We're not too far away. Election time is rolling around the corner.
Yeah.
It'll be kind of interesting to see what happens then. I'm hopeful that housing will have a big presence in the conversations that we'll be hearing in the next several months. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. So yeah, I appreciate your time. We're over time already today.
Oh, good.
Always love the conversation and love it that we come into it not very prepared, but talk about some important things. Learned a few things about Chat GPT today. Anybody that's coming to Denver, we have an interactive session on how to personalize your own Chat GPT so that messages that you create sound more like yourself, that you will want to participate in. But appreciate you, Rob. Thanks for doing this with
Oh,
me today. It's always fun. It's always good to see you. It's like this is the only time we talk.
I know it. I know. It's a good opportunity to get together either way. So I appreciate it, Faith. And now I guess what are we out? We're how
4
many days
weeks.
out? 3 weeks?
4 weeks.
4 weeks?
4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, 4 weeks
I
from conference. So I'll see you in 4, and then we can have a
better,
good chat in person then.
I better buy some flights.
You better do that. And for those of you who aren't registered or don't have your rooms either, you probably should do that because our room block ends on the 16th of this month, I believe. So we're getting close. Can't wait to see you all. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Appreciate you doing so. We will be back next Tuesday at this same time with another one of our lender members joining us. Appreciate you. Thanks, Rob.
Take care, guys.